Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an
The
atheist.
fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
and start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Nature Box, where you can get great tasting, healthy snacks and get them delivered right to your door. Delicious treats like sweet, blueberry, almonds, and a whole lot more. Support this show. You get 50% off your first order. Go to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. If we can have a moment here, I want you to know that I love you. And here's why. I did the radio show last week, the bonus broadcast that told the story about my recent nuptials in Alaska and our trip down 6 Mile Creek in Class 5 rapids, wondering if anybody would listen to the show or enjoy the show. And everybody just said it was a ball to listen to and they had a great time. And I really appreciate that. It was a fun story to tell. And it's the kind of thing that friends share. And we're all friends and family, so let's talk about it. Well, I asked for a wedding gift. Specifically, $10,000 for a wonderful and worthy secular charity called the Foundation Beyond Belief. I said, give me a gift. Give me and Natalie a wedding gift, but give it to the Foundation Beyond Belief. And I put a link up, okay? $10,000 in 6 weeks was the goal. It looks like we're going to hit it in 7 days. We are this close. See, the total right now as I speak is $9,295. We're just about $700 away in a week. Hugely humbling and amazing to see this community come together. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm not sure what to do next. Like for the next 5 weeks, do I just leave the link up and we see how high it goes? Because I'm tempted just to do that, because obviously there are a lot of needy people well beyond the $10,000 range who would benefit. Do I just leave it up? Anyway, I'll put the link in the description box of this show if you'd like to take us over the top tonight. The link's right there. $10,000 is this close in a week. And my thanks from both Natalie and me for doing that wonderful, wonderful gesture. Lots of stuff going on, by the way, as we get into the fall real fast. Convention-wise, I saw the lineup for ApostaCon coming up in Omaha, September 19th. Pretty good lineup. I mean, one of the guys, you may have heard of him, some astrophysicist named Tyson, is on the lineup. Apostacon.org for details on that one, which is going to be huge. Free Thought 2014 is going on in Nacogdoches, Texas. I just like saying Nacogdoches, by the way. It's just fun. That's coming up on the 27th of September. Delahunty's going to be down there. Aaron Rod, Jerry DeWitt, Beth Presswood, Kathleen Johnson, Brent Burt's going to be down there. And then in Florida, Orlando is the Free Flow event. You can go to free-flow.org. That's the 10th of October. That weekend, Lawrence Krauss and many others will be down there. So a lot of stuff going on as we get into the fall months. And so it's always exciting to see these events come together. If you get a chance, go out and be a part of it. It's going to be awesome. Before we get into tonight's show real fast, I want to tell you one of the reasons that I love Nature Box that I haven't yet spoken about on the radio. It's not just that I really like their business model, and it's not just that I really like the fact that they support this broadcast, which they do. And it's not just because I really do like their snacks. I mean, I really do. We munch on them all around here all the time. I like the fact that they're also doing something to make the world a better place, just like groups like the Foundation Beyond Belief and many others. They help to fight hunger. In fact, for every box they deliver, they donate a meal through Feeding America to help the millions of Americans who go hungry. And they have a goal of 1 million meals. And they've got a lot of good stuff to choose from. If you haven't checked out their website, check it out after the show tonight. They've got tons of great options, hundreds of snacks like French vanilla almond granola, smoky pumpkin seeds, Granny Smith apples, baked peppery potato sticks, and a whole lot more. Zero trans fats, zero high fructose corn syrup. You'll even find snacks that are low on sugar and without gluten, if that's part of your diet. And they ship for free anywhere in the United States, and now they ship to Canada. 50% off your first box. You can support this show and enjoy delicious, great tasting, and healthy snacks from NatureBox. Go to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. As I was preparing for this show, I was struck by the most rudimentary question. What is mental health? How do we define mental health? Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. Over the course of your life, if you experience mental health problems, your thinking, mood, and behavior could be affected. Many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors like genes or brain chemistry, life experience like trauma or abuse, and a family history of mental health problems. That from mentalhealth.gov on the basic facts about mental health. 1 in 5 Americans have experienced some kind of mental health issue. 1 in 10 young people have experienced a period of major depression. 1 in 20 Americans live with a serious mental illness like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. It accounts for the loss of more than 38,000 American lives each year, more than double the number of lives lost to homicide. Half of all mental health disorders show the first signs before a person turns 14, 3/4 before they hit 24. Less than 20% of children and adolescents with diagnosable mental health problems receive the treatment they need. Early mental health support can help a child before problems interfere with other developmental needs. We're talking about mental health tonight, and I've got some very special guests who are much smarter on the issue than I am, and of course that's why they are here. On my guest list tonight, I've got J.T. Eberhard, who is an activist and runs the blog WWJTD. What would JT do? He is someone who's spoken with great transparency about mental illness and about the struggles with depression he has had in his own life. And with his permission, we'll speak about that here on the radio tonight. And I will include the link to his Skepticon speech in the description box of this show. JT's wife, Michaelin, will be joining us tonight. She has a Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience. You may know her as the lead organizer for Reason Fest, which brings together some of the most influential atheists in the world for a free event every year. I've got Jeremiah Bean. He's a clinical psychology doctoral student currently researching the behavioral effects of violence as it relates to mental health. And then I called Dr. Daryl Ray just this afternoon, and I asked if he would like to chime in on the show, and he jumped at the opportunity. All of my guests on the panel tonight, thank you so much for being here and being part of the show.
Thanks for having us, Seth. Good to be on. Glad to be here.
Michaelin, do I have you in there?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay, I only heard male voices, and I want to make sure I had everybody on the panel. Obviously, the reason we're talking today is because of last week's news about the suicide of Robin Williams. Some people said, oh, come on, why does it take the death of a celebrity to get everybody all riled up? If this was the person next door, nobody would care. I disagree with that assessment. We'll talk about Robin Williams. He died August the 11th at his home in California, and it was determined he hanged himself. He committed suicide in his home, and the world was completely shocked. And then we all began talking about depression, about the nature of mental illness. Dr. Daryl Ray, let's talk about Robin Williams. The only reason people care is because he's a celebrity, right? That's the argument I hear out there. And what's your take on all this?
It's not a matter of how much money you've got. It's not a matter of how many people love you. It's a matter of getting help when as early as possible when you recognize the problems. What I've seen, unfortunately, in too many discussions online and other places is people just don't understand what mental illness is. It's like your car. The engine of your car can go bad, can get out of tune, can have problems, and you take it to a mechanic. Well, your brain is an organism that can have problems. Chemicals can go wrong in there. You can have a gene that misfires something somewhere in the development process. There's any number. It's the most complicated organ on the planet, the human brain. It's no surprise that things can go wrong with it. But we have great treatments. We have great ways to deal with it. And what I see in Robin Williams and other people like him is they didn't get the help they needed when they needed it. They didn't recognize the signs, or their loved ones didn't recognize the signs.
Jeremiah, there's a misconception out there that people with mental illness are prone to violent behavior. This seems to be your field, right? Someone's mentally ill, they're dangerous. Keep your distance.
It's certainly true that there are some mental illnesses that will lead to violent behavior, like antisocial personality disorder and that sort of thing. But overall, people who are mentally ill need help. They don't need people running away from them.
There was a great blog post, a blogger I've never seen before, but I really think it's worth reading. It's heardinthepub.com. This blogger said something I absolutely agree with. She said Robin Williams did not die of suicide. Robin Williams died of depression. Suicide just happened to be the way it was expressed. People die of cancer all the time, but when you look at the actual death certificate, it says heart failure or some other organ failed. But the cancer, people say, well, they died of cancer. No, he died of cancer, but he also died of heart failure. And so we should be talking about this in those terms. Robin Williams died of depression. Depression can be lethal, and we need to recognize it as such and get treatment. There's a reason why our suicide rate's so high in the United States compared to, say, Switzerland or Sweden or Denmark or even Germany, because they've got mental health services there that actually work, and they've got people that are ready to jump on it when they see the signs.
J.T. Eberhard, I know it's common for people to say that people who look happiest on the outside, Robin Williams is this force of nature. He's a comedic powerhouse. He is a walking comedy store. Everywhere he goes, he brings joy into people's life, and yet he is harboring all of these, for lack of a better word, demons. Is there something to that? Some of the people, are they trying to publicly overcompensate? Are they trying to talk themselves into being in a better mood?
It really depends on how much someone is treated, but trying to talk themselves into being better is certainly something people try to do.
I don't know why, JT, but I can barely hear you, my friend. I'm not really sure what's going on there. And I want to catch every word that you have to say. So is it a microphone placement issue on your Skype?
We just plugged in a headset. How does this sound?
Much cleaner, much cleaner. You're a little tinny, but I can hear the words that you're saying. So let's give that a shot.
Oh, yeah, good enough. What I was saying was people do certainly try to talk themselves into being better, and that's actually not a good thing because psychologically it puts the onus on them. It tells the person suffering that it's their fault. People really need to admit that they're sick and get treatment instead of trying to talk themselves into being better. That doesn't work for any other condition. It doesn't work for depression either.
I've heard people say quite often, come on, you have so much to be happy about. Look at your life. Look at all the beautiful people. Look at all the people who care about you. You've got a good job. You've got this. You've got that. They're giving you a laundry list.
And that is 100% the wrong thing to say because then it makes the person feel guilty that they're not doing better. It makes them feel weak. Robin Williams' death proved that depression doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care how much you have, how loved you are. And that's why it's so terrible for some people because they're sad, they can't get better, and they don't know why. Not doing better, it makes them feel weak. Robin Williams' death proved that depression doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care how much you have, how loved you are. And that's why it's so terrible for some people because they're sad, they can't get better, and they don't know why.
JT, would you be comfortable speaking again about your own challenges with depression in your own life? Kind of paint the picture for those in the listening audience.
Oh, Seth, for you and your voice, I'd be happy to.
Oh, just stop.
I'm a recovering anorexic, and when I'm in the bottom, it's the definition of anorexia. It's very difficult to eat. In fact, I'm kind of relapsing at the moment. My first therapy session with a new therapist is tomorrow. I just ate my 600th calorie on the day, and it was a handful of almonds, and I couldn't get myself to eat the almonds until I calculated out how many calories for each one individually. And when I say I can't, I just physically can't make myself.
And people have come to you and they've said, you need to just reason your way out of this. You're a rationalist, man. You are a skeptic. You are a, quote, enlightened thinker. You should be able to do the mind over matter thing. Have you heard this tactic before?
Of course I have. And I am. I think being rational is a moral virtue and moral imperative. But in my particular case, it's a battle between what I know and what my brain is trying to get me to believe. Every day my brain is telling me that this will all go away if I just lose weight. That's all I need to do. And the few seconds I have every day of looking at my weight on the scale and seeing if I've lost even a fraction of a pound is the happiest part of my day. And just the thought of not having that, even though I know that's bad for me, I'm aware that's bad for me, it's just something I can't get away from. You just lose your ability to see what is real. It's like if everyone in your life and all the newspapers were telling you that trees were made out of glass. Even though they would look like they were made out of wood to you, you would know they were made out of glass, but you just can't see it. You know what's true, but your mind bends everything else.
How long did you keep it to yourself, and why did you keep it to yourself? Were you afraid of being treated differently, being ostracized, or thought you were broken in some way?
Well, I think there's two periods that bear mention. The first is how long it took me to realize I was sick, and that was a much longer period. I was definitely ill and definitely suffering from this condition long before I ever came to grips with it and called a doctor and got help. And that was several years. How long did I keep it a secret? A year or two. And then I realized I was being a hypocrite encouraging atheists to come out of the closet when I wasn't coming out of the closet about this. And yeah, I thought people would treat me differently. I thought it would cost me my career as a writer, honestly. But it was actually just the opposite. I got so much support, so much love, and it's really taken off, and the secular community started caring very much about it, which just goes to show how much your brain can deceive you. I should have come out clean about it earlier, but my brain had just told me that I would lose everything if I did.
Michael, and talk to me. I mean, you've got the degree in neuroscience. We're talking about deep, complex workings of the brain. What's your take on mental illness and how we as skeptics should be approaching this complicated issue?
I think we tend to separate our mental health from our physical health, which is really something that doesn't happen. So our mental health is linked to our physical health. It is our physical health. What's happening in our brain is what causes our cognition, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. And I think that's something that's really difficult for people to wrap their heads around, because depression is a different kind of illness for a lot of people to see, because somebody suffering from depression, they are feeling bad emotionally, and it hurts their motivation. And I mean, it does affect you physically as well. Our emotions do. So often people with depression will feel very fatigued. Their bodies can feel sore limbs, heavy arms, heavy legs, indigestion, all sorts of things. So I think it's important to remember that mental illness is a physical illness.
So an anxiety disorder, bipolar, dissociative disorders, panic disorder, eating disorder, schizophrenia, those types of things. People will say, come on, it's all in the mind. And they make the mistake of separating the mind from the physical body when the mind is actually a part of the physical mechanism.
Exactly. It's all in our brain. That's where it all starts. And it's just important to keep that in mind. The brain is an organ, and it's super complex, and we hardly understand it at all. And we've got so much more to learn about it. And I think that's why mental illness is very confusing for a lot of people, because we don't have the answers.
Well, Michael and Dr. Ray mentioned the sort of dearth of education about what mental illness is, and then not much of a support structure. I mean, this country is way behind when it comes to addressing mental health issues, according to Daryl. And you would agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to JT the other day about how going to school as a kid, or even through high school, mental health was never really talked about. It's not a normal class to talk about. Maybe they touched on it in health class, but I think that that's something that needs to be put in our education system from the very beginning. And we don't, in America, we don't really seem to understand what a mental illness is, and we're not being taught how it works.
We fear it. We stigmatize it. We separate ourselves from it. We plug our ears and say, you know what, those people are different. And then we walk away. Do we just cheat ourselves out of the opportunity to genuinely and honestly address the issue?
Absolutely. And I think, people steer clear of things that they don't understand. And if they've never had to deal with it, me as a kid, as a teenager, I never understood why somebody would want to kill themselves. I didn't understand mental illness at all. I didn't understand depression. I was somebody who definitely thought, wow, obviously these people have so much to live for. I didn't get it at all, and nobody was teaching me any other way to think about it.
I want to read a few emails during the broadcast, and I must apologize right now because there's just no way I can get to all of the emails that were submitted for this show, people sharing hugely transparent windows into their lives. Thank you to everybody for sharing your stories. If I could, I would read every single one, but we'd be here all week. So I've just got a few, and it's not that one had more merit than another. It's just this is kind of a sampling of what we got in. And as she mentions JT, and here I'll have JT respond first. Deborah said this: I've been listening to your podcast for some time. I've never contacted you personally. However, when I heard your topic next week was mental health, she said this last week, and that you were having JT Eberhard, who I absolutely love, I knew it was the time to email you. I've struggled with mental illness, specifically depression, for as long as I can remember. I also happened to grow up deeply immersed in a very conservative Calvinist Christian church and was either homeschooled or attended very small private Christian schools until I graduated high school. I'm about to start my 4th year at a large public university. And with the experience of really entering the world for the first time came a lot of questioning of the things I always thought were certain, i.e. that God exists, that only his chosen people were going to spend eternity with him in heaven. I initially tried to maintain my Christian faith. I didn't want to be just a statistic, one of those many lost young people who leave the faith when they go off to college. However, within a couple of years, as I was exposed to more worldviews, and incidentally, as I actually learned real science for the first time in my life, I drifted away from religion and now identify as an agnostic atheist. Leaving religion has had a huge impact on my mental health, but I'm still very much struggling with the relationship between the two. Within the past 18 months, I've been struggling with severe anorexia, which is unfortunately very obvious to those around me. This has coincided with my public coming out as an atheist, which my family's convinced means my atheism somehow caused my eating disorder. I've tried to explain that this isn't the case, as it wasn't leaving the church that made me sick, if anything. I think my recovery would be much easier if I didn't have the church trying to get me to stop questioning and just going along with their teachings. I'd even go so far as to say that my religious upbringing played a role in triggering my disorder, as it continually encouraged me to blame myself and my sinful nature for all my problems or doubts. If you're familiar with Calvinism, you know how ingrained the doctrine of man's total depravity is. I was told repeatedly and explicitly that being depressed was a sin, as it was evidence of a lack of contentment with what God has given you. At some point, I just couldn't take it anymore. I've been recovering from my eating disorder slowly but surely over the past few months. It's definitely a daily battle. I was just wondering if you and JT could give me any input on how public I should be with my atheism as I'm in the recovery process. Those who see me struggling automatically link my skepticism with my difficulties, and I feel like I'm in some sense giving those around me a bad impression of atheism when I really want to share how liberating and wonderful it's been for me to be able to ask questions and truly think for myself for the first time in my life. How can I talk to people who think that my mental illness is just a side effect of my lack of faith and is just evidence that God is pushing me to return to him? Deborah, thank you so much for the message. JT, this is a tough one. You want to address it?
I'd love to. Deborah, I hear where you're coming from there. The best way I can explain the degree to which you should be open is whatever is comfortable to you. There's certainly a tremendous utility to coming out of the closet, both as an atheist and as a sufferer of a psychological affliction. But how and when you do that needs to be when you are comfortable. But as far as what to say to your family when they link your atheism with your eating disorder, I would say two things. The first thing I would say is, if you don't think that Christians get clinical depression or get eating disorders or commit suicide, you have no idea what you're talking about. And that goes into the second thing I would say. If you were to walk through a psychiatric hospital, you would find person after person after person praying to Jesus every day, every minute, every second for their condition to go away. And you'll also find that the only people there helping them are the doctors. They're the mortal men and women employing what human beings have discovered over years of studying this to try and make it better. Christianity does not make you depressed. In fact, if you want to be here really all week, ask Dr. Ray and Jeremiah Bean about Christians who masquerade as therapists to try and catch people at their weakest to convert them to their faith. Those people are out there, and they are, frankly, the scum of the earth. So if you really want to make a statement, get away from the religion, go to a doctor, and do what you can to get better. That's how you're going to serve yourself best, and that's how you're going to represent atheism best.
Jeremiah Bean, JT brought it up. We've got people out there who are, the church is great at having quote-unquote recovery programs for the weak, the vulnerable, the people who have been beat up in their lives, and the church is waiting there with a big net, the big religious net for people to fall into. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, isn't that always the case? Whenever there's someone suffering, there's always a white knight to come in for their own cause. I see that a lot with, what I look into for, mass murder, suicide things. Always someone grabbing it as like for their particular pet social, whatever social activity or whatever social activism they've got going on. But, the quickest and simplest way to respond, although it's a little snarky, is I would say prayer is not an evidence-based treatment for depression, thanks though, or anorexia. We test these things and we know what works. And so whenever someone comes in and pretends that they have the right answer, I probably just ask for a citation. Again, that's a little snarky as well. But the thing is this, whenever things are well known, it only serves to give them an advantage to kind of muddle the water and say, look, it's so confusing, but I have the answer. But in reality, we know what works. We spend a lot of time and money. A lot of people have generously donated their money to find the answers for this, and we do have a lot of answers on what can fix, anorexia, depression, things you can do. And unfortunately, all the studies that I've reviewed myself on prayer is that it doesn't work for mental health. So, it's just another snake oil in this situation. Unfortunately, I wish it was something more, but it's not.
I want to back up just a little bit and pick up where your email said something, I think, and it will help us understand the importance of the psychotherapy project that JT's already mentioned. What we're really doing here is battling theories of mental health. The religionists are fond of saying, well, evolution is just a theory and all that kind of theory bullshit. But what we see in religion is religions have a theory of mental health. And Calvinism has a theory of mental health, and she talks about that in her email. Catholicism has a theory about mental health. And you see each of these religions acts out their own theory. The evangelicals have a theory that if you read the Bible and pray and sing and talk in tongues or whatever, you'll gain mental health from Jesus. And Calvinists believe that you are convinced and convicted from the minute you're conceived in some supernatural way by God, and if you violated some law, then you're going to suffer mental illness. So mental illness comes from God in that sense. And you can look right in the New Testament, and you can see that Jesus supposedly cured mental illness by throwing the demons out into swine, and the swine jump over a cliff. Well, that's a theory of mental health. And what we're hearing in our culture is these theories coming out. Now, people aren't as dumb as they used to be to talk about, well, he had demons, that's why he did this or that behavior, or they're depressed because they've got demons. But people still believe that. There are lots of people out there that believe that somehow you're mentally ill because you're not right with God, and that's what she's talking about. So we're battling theories of mental illness, and we need to be right up front. What's your theory of mental illness? Is it that Jesus heals, that pray enough and you'll get mentally ill, or is your theory that the brain is a complex organism that sometimes goes wrong and we need to treat that, just like you treat a heart?
I'm curious about your experience with this too, Dr. Ray, but I know in our clinic we see a lot of religious folks, including pastors, who come in and under the guise of night through the back door and promise secrecy. I haven't had a good experience that anyone has gone to church and been okay. I live in Mississippi. It's like the bastion of, Protestant faith, that if there ever is one. And we also are, I think, in the top, it's 1, 2, or 3 in people who suffer from mental disorders. So
exactly right. There's a clear correlation between the degree of religiosity in a given area and the amount of mental illness in that particular area. Yeah. What you see in places like Mississippi, well, any highly religious group, is that religion hides psychosis. I mean, look at, if you just watch, just to give everybody, your listening audience an example, what if you just watched Ted Haggard or Jerry Falwell or one of these big preachers, and you took Jesus out of it, and you watched and listened to their behavior? Would you still think these folks are mentally balanced if they were standing there telling people, I'm going to burn you if you don't agree with me? That's basically what they're saying, when they say you're going to go to hell. If you watch the behavior in these people, there's a lot of mental illness standing up there in the pulpit every Sunday morning, but it's hidden by the guise of religion. I've seen that all my career. You go to the mental health institutions and you see people praying to Jesus all the time because they've got a theory of mental health and mental illness that ain't working, but they're going to keep doing it because that's all they know. They don't understand medicine and psychology.
All right, so I go and seek treatment with a mental health professional who happens to be an evangelical of one stripe or another, and they're injecting Jesus into the conversation, or whatever their deity or spirit helper is. And this has been common enough, Daryl, that you have been involved with an organization that sort of helps to address and provide an alternative. And I know I've got you for a limited time tonight. You've been gracious enough to give us an hour, but I know you're on the road and you've got a lot of stuff going on. But I don't want the show to end without talking about the Secular Therapist Project and why it exists, what it does.
As you said, if you go to a counselor and they're evangelical or they're a Catholic or they're a Buddhist even, it doesn't really matter. If they've got a supernatural belief, that means they probably got a theory of mental health that isn't science-based. And so many therapists out there in the real world are poorly trained, or their religion is more important than learning good basic therapeutic methods. And there's lots of therapists out there that are trained very well to make you feel good, but they don't have a clue how to actually help you get through whatever mental illness you're experiencing. So I started the Secular Therapist Project about 3 years ago, and our purpose is to find secular therapists. And if you got a listener out on your listening audience tonight that's a therapist and you're secular, I want you to apply to us and get your name in. And we vet every application. There's 4 of us that'll look at the application and say, is this person secular, and do they use evidence-based methods? And if they do, we get them into the database. And then somebody like JT or Michael Lynn or somebody who's a potential client can search on our database, like Match.com or Plenty of Fish. You can search and find a therapist close to you, but it's all anonymous. There's nobody's name is out there, nobody's address. And the reason for that is because it's very difficult for secular therapists to advertise. In Oklahoma, in Mississippi, where Jeremiah is, if a therapist said, I'm an atheist therapist or I'm a secular therapist, their whole practice would dry up overnight. No minister would refer to them, no hospital, no judge. The referral base would all dry up because secularism has been so vilified. And yet secular ways of dealing with mental health are the only ones that we have any scientific evidence for. Jesus and Muhammad don't cure mental illness. We've got pretty good evidence for that.
Daryl, didn't you have an article on Greta's blog that released today?
It just came out literally minutes before we went up on the podcast. Greta, I wrote an article, a guest post for Greta on the Secular Therapy Project. So I'd really encourage people to go read that. And then just click on the link and go to seculartherapy.org. If you want to find a therapist that's guaranteed to be secular, that's the place to go find it. Seculartherapy.org. Even if you can't find somebody local, you can search by zip code and hopefully there's somebody local. But we've got therapists that'll do phone therapy, those Skype or Facebook therapy. So don't let distance be an excuse for getting help. There's just too many excuses. Here's something I find. People are always saying, well, it's too much trouble, it costs too much money. But if you just did a cost-benefit analysis, how much money is it going to cost you to miss work because you're depressed, or to get divorced because you didn't take care of, your anxiety issues? The cost of mental illness is enormous to the people who experience it, and enormous to all the people around them, too. So get help and find somebody on our Secular Therapy Project website.
Daryl, whenever you land, you find a landing zone, shoot me the link to that article, and I'll put it in the description box of this show so everybody can easily find it, okay?
Sure, will do. Yeah.
JT Everhard, go ahead.
Well, if I could add anything to that, I would add that UCLA just got a huge grant to perform a study on whether or not seeking religious counseling helped gay people who were suffering from depression. And they actually found that gay people who went to religious counseling were actually more likely to commit suicide. So it's not that just religious treatment, I use that word in quotations, for depression doesn't work, but it's that it functions as snake oil. When people are getting it, they think they're getting real treatment, and so then they don't get treatment that actually works, and it actually does harm.
I do know that people who suffer from mood disorders, left untreated, as Dr. Ray was saying, even if you try something that makes someone feel better and you still have the underlying disorder, you're still 13 times more likely to take your own life. In fact, there was a recent meta-analysis that came out about people who had completed suicides, and they collected all the behavioral data and also did some structured interviews with the suicide completionist family and things, and they found that 90% of them had usually comorbid mood disorders. So having this stuff not treated, you were talking about price as far as like missing days of work and getting divorced, also the very real chance that you'll kill yourself.
There's a little experiment that your listeners can do for themselves to help understand what mental illness, kind of a tiny, tiny little sample. I mean, like you said in your introduction, a lot of us experience it sooner or later. I was depressed one time after I got divorced. I've experienced it personally and know how difficult it is to move through it. But even if you've never experienced mental illness, there's a little experiment. Think about the last time you got a song stuck in your head, and it stayed there for days sometimes. You'd go to sleep with a damn song in your head. You'd wake up with a song in your head, and this song's going to drive me crazy. And most people have had that happen to them. Sometimes, more often, several times a year it'll happen, or even more often than that. That's a tiny little example of what mental illness is. It's the song that's stuck in your head. You can't get rid of it, and it's going to drive you crazy. And it's just the tiniest example, but every human being on this planet can relate to that one, I'm guessing. Have you had that happen to you, Seth?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Funny, I don't know why I'm giving you the specific example, but Natalie had the Phantom of the Opera on, and I've had Phantom in my head for the past probably 8 days, and I just can't get it out. Figure. So, look, I'd like to go to the switchboard. I've got a caller queue of people who would like to submit questions. I'll only be able to get to a fraction of them. Now, with 4 people on the panel, we'll probably have to, I would say this, whoever's maybe got the biggest fire in their belly or really wants to jump in, go ahead. I'm going to try to prevent a long 4-part answer for each call so I can get a few in. Would that be all right?
Yep.
Yeah, great.
Area code 435. You're on the Thinking Atheist Radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is Ben from Salt Lake City.
Thank you for calling, Ben. I've got a vast panel of experts that are fielding questions about mental health tonight.
And fascinating topics. Before I get into what I was calling about, I'd just like to say that I am a direct beneficiary of the Secular Therapist Project.
Wow.
Thanks to you and your show and having Dr. Daryl Ray on earlier in the previous episode. So
Wonderful.
Big heartfelt thank you to the two of you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know. We appreciate that.
It made a huge difference in my life. But back to the subject, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that the brain is a physical organ. And, you think about any other organ and all the things that can go wrong with it, and then you think about how complicated the brain is and how it's an organ interacting with the environment, reacting to the environment. And I think it has huge implications, societal implications, specifically to our criminal justice system. And I'd like to hear your take on criminal behavior and knowing what we know about childhood development and psychology, and specifically how socioeconomic background, exposure to violence, etc.,
can contribute to mental health and the demographics of our prison system.
I think Jeremiah could talk about the first part. I worked in the prison system for 10 years. I can talk about the second part.
So as far as like violent tendencies go, a large portion of that, so there's this new model, and you can look it up if you're interested. I'm not going to bore everyone. Like Seth mentioned, we don't want a 4-part answer to this, but it's called the Catalyst model, and essentially it's by this the author Ferguson, and go look it up yourself if you'd like. But there's a large amount of variance that's kind of gobbled up or taken in by the fact that there's biological or genetic predisposition towards violence. One of the most important things that, if you're familiar with epigenetics at all, it's kind of how your genetics are expressed. One of the most important things that can happen early on in childhood development, I remember you mentioned that specifically, is that if you are exposed to familial violence, so violence within the family especially seems to be a larger kind of, it allows that genes to express a little more often. That's one of the largest predictors. So you've got your genetics, you've got your early familiar violence, you've got one more thing called the impulse control device. And that's something that we took from the neurological literature. So maybe it's possible that Michael might know more about this than I do, but I am familiar with that. And it's that double of about 80% of the fact that like those who might have those violent tendencies end up acting upon it. And that's something that fortunately people like myself or Dr. Ray, people who have psychological interventions can interact on, because we can't really catch everyone who has been exposed to familial violence or there's not much we can do once we find the biological indicators of a propensity to violence. So, yes, there's definitely a lot of things that go on early on in life that can put you in this trajectory of violent tendencies. And then overall, once you identify yourself, and now that you're in the part of life where you're probably coming in to seek treatment once things start happening, we're definitely going to want to be working on those things that help us prevent ourselves on acting impulsively on those tendencies.
Dr. Darrell Ray?
I did work in the criminal justice system. I was a psychologist for 10 years. And my take after leaving that system is it's a horrendous manufacturer factory for creating mental illness. You cannot go into prison and maintain your sanity hardly. It would be amazing to have somebody like go in and come out reasonably balanced. Our entire correctional system is almost designed perfectly to create mental illness, so it's no surprise that people come out of prison or come out of jails, places like that, with greater problems because there's no help for them once they get in there.
I kind of have the feeling that we'll look back in 100 years as the way that we, treat criminals the same way that we look at, how people used to treat epileptics by trying to torture them out, the demon out of them,
Yeah. Here's it's kind of timely. It's even more timely than Robin Williams, but you look at the behavior that's going on with the police in Ferguson, for example, in Ferguson, Missouri. I live in Kansas, right next to, not far from where Ferguson is. Wow. And having been in the correctional system, years and years ago, there was a kind of interesting piece of research where they gave MMPI, multiphasic personality inventory, to a group of prison guards and a group of prisoners, and then handed those off to a group of psychologists who were experts in interpretation, said, tell us which one of these is the prisoners and which one of these is the guards. And they couldn't do it. That tells us something right there. The institutions have huge impact on the personalities of the people in those institutions. And when you see police misbehaving, I hear this, it's one bad cop, or it's just this bad cop or that bad cop. No, their entire institutions tend to push people towards mental illness or towards behavior that would be inappropriate or even dangerous. I mean, you look at the entire Nazi Germany or Stalin, people were doing horrible things that they never thought or dreamed they would do. So I think we need to pay attention to what institutions are doing to us. And one of those institutions is churches. Churches push people towards mental illness. I'm quite convinced that religion creates all sorts of excuses for bad behavior, and then that bad behavior piles on and creates more bad behavior. The number one predictors, for example, of child abuse in a home is drug or alcohol abuse. But the second biggest predictor of child abuse is religiosity. So religion's doing a lot of bad things to people, and it's creating all sorts of, mental illness in people that then don't get treated. They go to their minister to get counseling.
Hey, thank you so much for the call. Greatly appreciated, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for the panel. Fascinating.
Michael, and before I read the next email, how much of this are we unlocking? Like, we haven't solved depression. I mean, if you go in and you say, I suffer from depression, the medications may differ, the treatments may differ. people are still sort of throwing stuff on the wall to see what sticks, right? I mean, how much have we figured out about some of this brand of mental illness?
We're learning more every day, and there's still a lot that we don't know, but we've come a long way. There are all sorts of different therapy techniques, different medications, different things that people can do. And I think the biggest problem is that humans are so complex. Our brains are so complex, and I don't think there could possibly ever just be one treatment for depression, no one magical medication, because there are so many different factors in each person's lives, and there's not ever really going to be a cookie-cutter cure. So a person could try going to therapy without medication, a person could try therapy and, different medications from their doctor, but I mean, I am not a medical doctor, obviously. I have a bachelor's. But yeah, for the most part, when you see a psychiatrist, they'll try, say, an antidepressant, an SSRI. They'll try it out for, maybe a month or so, because those pills take 3 to 4 weeks to start making a difference in a person. I think it's most frustrating for patients because, yes, it is hit and miss often if you're just trying medication for the first time. So you have to really monitor yourself or have others monitor you while you're trying these new medications, because they can have the opposite effects of what you're shooting for. They can actually increase suicidality in some people.
And that's why talk therapy should almost always be associated with drug therapy, with any kind of psychoactive drugs. You don't want to let somebody loose with a SSRI without having them report back on a regular basis in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
now, talking to a therapist as opposed to just talking to someone. Come on, Seth, you need to talk to somebody.
Absolutely.
Grab a friend, grab somebody you care about, go talk to them. You don't need a therapist. What would you say to that?
That's not going to cure the root cause. There's nothing wrong with going and talking to your friend. I don't have any problems with that. Most of us do it, just get things off of our chest. But there's a lot wrong. Go and talk to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. And as JT said right off the bat, giving some of the worst advice or asking some of the worst questions, you can actually cause people to become more depressed, feel more guilty, feel more responsible for this malfunction of their brain. It's not their fault. And yet poor interventions create that feeling in people.
Depression is a recurring theme. I mean, probably 80% of the emails that I got on this issue, it dealt with some kind of depression. I had an email from someone who left the signature line unsigned, who said, I wanted to write an email describing what it's like to suffer from depression, but after 3 days of trying, I can't do it. That's depression in a nutshell. Simple tasks become impossible. That rings a bell, huh?
Perfect. And there's another scary thing about not getting help from a therapist. Now, of course, there's an advantage of getting help from a friend. The advantage is that, you have your social support structure right there. And if they're willing to engage in help, that's helpful. But there is a danger that suicide, so if you graph people's kind of symptom severity during the depression, because, you have good days and then you've got your bad days and you got your really bad days. And what we found in the literature on that is that the lowest points where people are having their lowest lows, that's not when they're committing suicide. They're actually committing suicide when they start picking back up. So somewhere around, it's almost a baseline. So when they can pick themselves up off the couch and then actually get up and go do a planned behavior, such as committing suicide or attempting suicide. And the scary part about that is they're getting the most intervention from friends and family while they're at their lowest, because they're saying, oh, look, he needs help, she needs help. And they go in and intervene, and they help them get off the couch and do things, and they help them in a lot of different ways. But as soon as they back up, that's actually the danger zone. When they say, okay, they're about getting back to where they need to be, that's when people commit suicide. So that's another danger, is that what you don't know can actively harm you or the loved one you're trying to help.
JT, when you've hit the valley, does the simple tasks become impossible line ring true? Did it ring true for you?
They do, and that actually is an influence on what Jeremiah just said. Oh, God, now I forgot what I was going to say. Darn it.
That's all right. We got time. I mean, Daryl doesn't. The rest of us got all night.
I got to go in about 5 minutes or so.
You talked about going and talking to a friend. That's great, and you should do that. You should get it off your chest. If you have diabetes, you should go talk to a friend and get it off your chest. But you shouldn't go to a friend to treat your diabetes. You should go to a doctor for that. And the same is true of depression. You can't be going to your friends to treat you because they don't know how to treat you. It's not a failure on them as a friend. It's just they're not trained to do it. And as far as what Jeremiah was saying, there's actually a myth going around, and this is how secular people can help, is to know the myths and to help debunk them, just like they do with homeopathy. But the myth is that SSRIs and antidepressants cause people to commit suicide. And like all other pernicious myths, there is a grain of truth to this. There is a period when you're taking your SSRIs, about the second or third week in, when you are more likely to commit suicide, and that's because what you said, Seth, about the simple task becoming impossible and depression kills your motivation. There comes a time when these medications, if they're working, restore your motivation, and that point comes before they get to really curing the depression. So now you have your motivation back, but the depression is still eating you, and that's when you tend to commit suicide. Now, these drugs on the whole stop people from committing suicide. They make your life better, but you've got to get through that window. And the way to do that is to count on your friends, to acknowledge that you cannot see what is real sometimes when you have these conditions, and to trust your friends to see reality for you and guide you through it. You need to have people checking in on you during that period, once, twice a day, to make sure you're okay.
I've got Dr. Daryl Ray for just another second here, so let me squeeze one more phone call in quickly. Area code 610. You're on the Thinking Atheist Radio podcast. Who's this?
Hello, my name is Jenny Ray.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks so much for calling. You're on the air with the panel tonight. What do you have for us?
This is amazing. I've called in how many times, and I've never gotten on this show. This is fantastic.
Glad you're here.
I actually did. I'm very glad to be here as well, Seth. Love the show.
Thank you.
I actually did send you in an email a couple of days ago. I know you probably got completely inundated by them. I was, honestly, I had the tagline, the non-believing orphan, which sounds kind of a bit dramatic, but although I am 35 years old, the past year I did suffer through the loss of both of my parents. So that is kind of setting the stage for my mental state right now. In the past, I have also been treated for anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and eating disorders. So I've had my history. I really have. And here I am, of course, dealing with the loss of both my parents, the settlement of an estate, and overall, basically, it's feeling like life is completely just taking me while I'm down. And I have been pretty much a lifelong non-believer. I never really bought into the whole religion thing, even though I did grow up like that. And this whole Robin Williams death thing last week really kind of brought the whole idea of people suffering from anxiety and mental disorders and depression to the forefront. It really did get people talking. And it got people talking about suicide. But I noticed there was a particular trend through all this conversation that I heard that was kind of almost bothering me. Everybody said, suicide is so horrible. Everybody has so much to live for. Why would you want to do that? And I felt like a horrible individual for actually kind of empathizing and thinking that I understood. I understood why somebody would want to do that. As a non-believer, of course, you know that there's no afterlife that I would personally be looking forward to. But I can understand very, very much how somebody would want to end their pain. And of course, I am not in that state right now. I would not be harming myself. I would never do that because our society has such a stigma against it. We look at suicide as a horrible, horrible thing. Why do we look at it like that? We look at it like that because there is so little support for people who feel this way. If somebody actually does want to actually end their life, we can't even agree on letting somebody who is terminally ill decide to die, let alone somebody who's just done with the pain of suffering from depression, somebody who's had done it for years and just feels like they will never feel joy again. And I'm wondering why doesn't society take a bit of a different look at suicide? What if somebody really does sincerely want to end their life? And they've talked to psychiatrists, they've talked to families, they've talked to friends, and they said, guys, I am tired. I am exhausted. I don't want to just randomly get old and some random day I'm going to get sick and die. I don't want to wait for that. I want to take it into my own hands. Why don't we examine it that way? Why don't we have legislation built around self-determined termination of life?
Daryl, my friend, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get into that's a whole other show, but I will address one thing that you're talking about. That's that there's some kind of a difference in depression. And there's situational depression, and when you deal with the death of both of your parents in a very short period of time, it's almost predicted any human being's probably going to go into some temporary depression, and it can be really bad. It can really be difficult. But you eventually will come out probably in time over time. But chronic depression is something very different, and that's what we saw Robin Williams suffering from. And I think what we see is that people oftentimes go into situational depression, but they don't come out. And that's when it goes from situational to chronic. That's when people need help. In fact, I'm an advocate that if you go through a divorce, if you go through a death of a very close loved one, like a child or a spouse or something, you need to go straight to therapy and work for several months just to make sure you're working through this. Because the grief and loss issues can be just overwhelming, and it can push you into chronic depression. It can push you into chronic diseases. Like I said earlier, the cost-benefit is so great to you. You won't spend 2 or 3 or 4 years not being able to get out of bed hardly because you got shoved into. And like Jeremiah said, we all are born with tendencies. Every one of us has a genetic weakness somewhere. And if we're hit with the right trauma, with the right environmental influence, every human on this planet can be pushed in to some kind of mental illness. I mean, that's what post-traumatic stress disorder is. It's somebody who was pushed beyond the limits of what they're capable of dealing with. Chinese discovered they could push people in that direction when they tortured people in the Korean War. And we've seen all sorts of examples of that in religion. Religions traumatize people, and then they have a hard time coming out of it.
Very quickly, if I may, Dr. Ray, I know you've got a jet.
Yeah, I got to go.
For spending this last hour with us, thank you so much. Safe travels, and we'll talk soon, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Take care. The show will continue. I want to keep going here, if we may, with the guest that I have, but I wanted to make sure and respect Daryl's time. He was very kind to call in at the sort of the last minute to be a part of this panel. Anybody else want to jump in here?
I do. I know Jeremiah's got a lot to say about PTSD, so I'll be really, really short so we can get to him. But she asked about why don't we trust people who want to end their lives with the decision to end their lives. And personally, I don't begrudge anybody wanting to end their lives, but the problem with trusting a broken brain to make that decision is when you're in the clutches of a lot of different conditions, including depression, your brain simply cannot be trusted. My brain tells me that I shouldn't eat, ever. And even though I may want to never eat, I shouldn't be allowed to make that decision. There should be people around me telling me that what I want is simply wrong and that I'm incapable of being rational about that right now. The same is true about a million other conditions, and the same is true about people who want to take their own lives. As someone who has a suicide attempt in their past, a lot of times it's not something you plan out. Sometimes it is, but most often it's not. Most often you don't even want to die when you commit suicide. You just panic because you need all of the psychological pain to stop, and you just panic. And questions about life and death should never be decided in a moment of panic.
JT, I'm going to have you pull that microphone back from your, just a little bit. I'm getting a lot of pops and sort of stuff in there. If you can just bring it back from your lips just a little bit.
Man,
for some reason,
I'm too quiet now.
I know.
I
know. Internet radio is a blessing and a curse. Jeremiah Bean, what do you think?
Well, it sounds like there's a couple issues going on, but as far as like PTSD goes, it is true. The short-term PTSD, we have a different name for it. We actually give it a whole different. Don't get me started on the way we classify disorders, but it's called acute stress disorder, and it's perfectly normal. And I should stray away from saying normal, because usually one of the first things I get, at least in the therapy room, is people say, "Am I normal?" or "How weird am I?" And I always say, for your particular circumstance, with what you were handed in life, you're perfectly normal. There's never a point where I'm going to call someone not normal, because of the fact that, if you do believe that we're hardwired to be vulnerable to some of these things, and there's no reason why you shouldn't, then, normalcy is just a matter of, for you. But as far as PTSD goes, yes, we definitely have a lot of treatments. You're going to be, it's a miserable, miserable thing. I'm a combat veteran myself, and, I've seen a lot of it and experienced some very small symptoms like that. So it's a bad place to be. So if you are experiencing it, and if it's been that much time, I would encourage you to go get some evidence-based treatment. Stray away from, if I could just say, stray away from something called EMDR, eye movement desensitization. Don't do that. That's actually not an evidence-based therapy, but they'll use all the fancy good words for it. So at any rate,
Hey, thank you so much for the call. I hope this is hope that answered your question tonight. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate every single one of your time. And again, I'm a huge fan of your show. Thank you very much for what you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
I had an email in from Chad who said, what I really wanted to say on this topic is that I think we as atheists and skeptics have the opportunity here to make a real impact on people's lives. Religions still have this Bronze Age concept that the mind and the body are separate, and so mental illness is treated as something which medical science cannot. It's one reason that mental illness has such a stigma in our society still, yet we know that mental illness is still part of our biology and chemistry. It's not magic, and it doesn't need supernatural cures. We have the chance to be on the front lines promoting rational means to helping people. As humanists, we have the ability to treat those with a mental illness just as we would anyone in need of any other medical treatment, to set an example and to give those who need help the type of dignity and care they deserve. I think that's very well said. JT, Michael, you want to jump in on that?
No, I think he hit the nail on the head. But one thing I will say is while we have the chance to do all those things and the obligation to do all of those things, something I found amongst skeptics, we're so keen on ensuring that people are rational. A lot of times when we're dealing with someone who's mentally ill, what we see is, they're not being rational, and that's bad. You need to start being rational. Skeptics and atheists are oftentimes, in my experience, even worse about that, without realizing that in the case of the mentally ill, in the case of religious people, they're just failing to be reasonable. But in the case of mentally ill people, they simply often lack the capability to be rational, and that's what needs to be fixed. They don't need to be blamed for it.
So you're saying a supposedly enlightened skeptical community actually discounts people with some kind of a mental illness as, hey, they're irrational. We just sort of brush them off. Do we have a deficiency in how we deal with mental illness? Is that your point?
I'm not saying that. I think on the whole, the skeptic community is much better about it. But because of our very healthy obsession with rationality, a lot of times that's all we tend to see when we're looking at mentally ill people is the irrationality. And we're sometimes very bad at understanding how a person can just be incapable of being rational.
Let's go to the phones again. Area code 303. Thank you so much for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is Casey from Denver.
Casey, thanks for waiting. Thanks for calling. What do you have for the panel tonight?
Well, I got a little disclaimer first. I know Jeremiah, and I should let everyone know he's been a terrific sounding board for me as I've been walking through coming out of my faith. A couple of things, and I'll get to them quickly. I'm juggling a toddler, so I'll try to be quick.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
JT was giving a presentation that I was watching on YouTube, and he called out some unsung heroes. And I recognized a couple of people, and I wanted to tell him the couple of people that he brought up were Brian and Michelle. And I wanted him to know that it was Michelle's blog that first gave me the real permission in my life to question how I was brought up and the beliefs that we're brought up with. And something that I haven't heard anybody really bring up in the conversation yet is that I'm really impressed by the fact that we're talking mainly with a panel of men. And we're talking about, as unfortunate as it is, another one of our brothers that fell to mental illness. And I think it's a very important and present matter that there is, I think, still a stigma among men that we don't talk about mental illness and issues along those lines. And I'm really proud of this group getting together, these men getting together. GT, your wife spoiled the straight flush.
My wife's right here.
I know, and I was thinking about this on the way home from work last night, thinking like, this is going to be a straight flush of guys talking about this, and I think it's important that the guys really take a hold of the moment. And, your wife, wonderful though she is, and unfortunately I've got to include my wife, who's also a mental health professional. But I think it's important that us men understand that this is very much our problem and our world as well. And there may not be stigmas as much in other parts of the world, but I think in the U.S. it still is really a thing. And I don't know if there's others there that have encountered this more than I have, but I thought it was something that we really probably ought to bring out in the conversation. Otherwise, everyone, thank you very much for your time, Seth, of course.
Very kind. Thanks for calling the show. Very much appreciated.
So I'm the voice of the woman, but I do have something to say. When we look at the numbers of men versus women when it comes to mental illness, for depression specifically, roughly about twice the amount of women have depression versus men. And so often what we talk about in my classes is, how there is a stigma on men. I mean, there's a stigma on everyone, but it tends to be worse for men to talk about having depression, talk about your emotions and how you're feeling bad, and to then go and seek help because you're admitting you're feeling bad emotions and you're admitting, I don't think it's not admitting weakness, but that's how it feels when you like go and to talk to a therapist about how you're feeling. So there's a huge stigma for everybody, but I think it can be more difficult for men in a way.
Can I get real excited about this real quick? Because I'm actually looking at doing a study on this, and I've been talking about it for a little bit, about the fact that I just ran some numbers. I'm managing the clinic that I'm at right now, and the numbers are 86% female and 14% male. And that doesn't reflect any actual true diagnosis ratio in the population that I'm in. It represents treatment-seeking individuals. So for some reason, it's still, stigmatized, don't get me wrong, but it does seem to be more stigmatized than men. So we're looking to try to get the correct wording and the correct advertisement so that men would be more likely to seek therapy. One of the things is the word therapy. We found that men are a little more sensitive to the word consultation than therapy or psychotherapy or counseling. Which is interesting. And the fact that this is so understudied is, a great opportunity for people that are curious like myself, but also a little alarming because I see it as the fact that, men have the dominant voice in the country a lot of the time. So let's be honest about this. And if we're the ones who are stigmatizing mental health, then, that's a very real and very serious problem. I'm very, very interested in pulling them into the flock of treatment-seeking individuals, people who can talk about it openly and go seek help before it gets too bad, because violent suicide is more common in males, for example, because of the fact that they have these underlying mood disorders occasionally, and then that's occasioned with the fact that life stressed in, and, there they go.
If we can talk about suicide for just a moment, I hear the term cry for help suicide. Somebody puts a gun to his head, right? It's obvious that this person is intent on ending his or her life. Someone else takes pills or does some other action, which is called a cry for help. They really didn't want to die. They just wanted attention. They wanted someone to know they were hurting. Is there any merit to that, or does anyone want to speak to that?
Actually, I worked as a suicide crisis counselor on a suicide hotline, and I hate the term, or I hate the idea that people have that, somebody, taking a certain amount of pills that isn't enough to kill them, they're just trying to get attention. I mean, in a way, but it's looked at so negatively. Those are some very drastic measures to get attention, I think.
Yeah, it's like they're discounting them. Oh, you aren't truly suicidal.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just acting out, and so you're throwing some kind of a tantrum so the rest of us will notice. It's sort of a way of marginalizing someone who may be in very serious mental distress.
Yeah, if somebody is so distressed that they're grabbing a bottle of pills and taking some number of them, then they're sick and they do need help, and maybe they're having trouble expressing that in some other way. I don't know, Jeremiah.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a lot of people have looked into something called suicide attempters versus completionists. And, that's kind of a morbid way to think about it, but it's true. And there are people, and there are certain disorders that lead you that sort of precipitate that sort of suicide attempt as a cry for help, such as a borderline personality disorder, for example. It's one of the hallmarks of it is, these sorts of grandiose behaviors to get people's attention. But I don't know why that's anything to scoff at. I think that just like you said, Michael, and that's a horrifying thing for someone to do is to try and kill themselves to get your attention. And instead, we should look at it like, wow, they went that far just to get my attention. Maybe I should give them attention, in smaller, when they do things that are less grandiose. But it does happen. It's true. But who are you to diagnose that? That would be my question to them. You're not an armchair psychologist, maybe leave this to the professionals to determine. And even still, we don't treat it much differently. Either way, it's someone that was toying with their own life to end the pain of some kind.
JT Eberhard, anything to add?
No, anything I say would be inadequate next to these two on the subject.
All right. I'd like to read one final email, and I'll be completely honest, I don't know that I understand it. So I'm giving it to you so that your collective IQs can educate me about what's going on here. A gentleman sent me an email, and he said, medication management has evidence-based treatments with algorithms that are validated. There are wide ranges of options within the algorithms that can be seen as, quote, experimenting. The Texas algorithm and the STAR-D study showed that the algorithm is as good, if not better, than an experienced doctor. Being a good doctor means sticking to the algorithm and not thinking you know better. What are we talking about?
Yes, this has to do with actuarial versus clinical models. This is a little heady, I think, for the podcast. I'll break it down. Basically, it means not that it's like so complex. It's just a lot of jargon. Basically, this means like a while back there was a big revolution in psychology back when we started becoming a science back, from our dark Freudian days, of how's your mother and all that. Well, when that happened, there was a guy named Paul Meehl, and essentially he was a guy who showed that, oh, look, I can use an algorithm to predict people's behavior better than a clinician sitting in the same room making a judgment. And at the time, that was absolutely true. So now what we do, we found that the best possible situation is two things, because algorithms can sometimes go completely wrong. More often than not, they're very good. But when they do, it's because they didn't take some contextual piece of information that was pretty obvious in the room, or at least to an experienced clinician. So right now we do use both. We use tools, we call them assessments or screeners, and they're actuarially based, so they're based on algorithms, statistics, math. And we use those to screen for things like depression, PTSD, or any sort of thing, including like symptoms like loneliness, that kind of thing, because people's self-report is a little variable. Well, at any rate, we use those, and then we use our clinical judgment based on what we found from those data. So, yes, we're in kind of this new age where we use both, and one informs the other. So as far as like medication management, we use that in psychology as well. But it's also, I think it's the same model, and I'm not a psychiatrist, I don't know, but I think it's the same model that they use in psychiatry and medication management circles.
Kind of a mapping out of mental illness in a way.
Absolutely, yeah.
Anybody else?
I think that comes down to, again, just humans being so complex. And yeah, it would be really great if we had the perfect algorithm that we could just put all the numbers into and then be like, bam, here's your awesome pill that's definitely going to work for you. And this is all you need to do for your treatment. But I think that, yeah, right now where we stand, we're doing a bit of both. And that's all we really can do.
Before I end with a letter, a beautiful letter, and we've been through all these heavy topics. It's been kind of a heavy show. We've been talking about depression and eating disorders and suicide and anxiety and PTSD and all this stuff. I wanted to end with kind of a positive, and so I'm going to share that with you here in just a second. But before I do so, I want to give each one of you kind of a final word on the subject of skepticism and mental health. What are your thoughts? What would you like to cap the show with tonight? I'll start with you, J.T. Eberhard.
I think it's really easy to get the idea that the people we're talking to right now are the people who are afflicted with some kind of psychological condition. But I don't view it that way. The people I'm talking to out there are the ones who have never experienced mental illness, who maybe don't know a lot about it. We need you. Everything I said about people with mental disorders having a hard time parsing reality is very, very true. And without people around us who at least try to understand what it's like, who are at least mildly informed, our odds of survival and our odds of living a life that is nowhere near normalcy go down significantly. You're the ones who really need to understand this. You're the ones that need to drag us to the doctor. You're the ones that need to watch us and make sure we take our medication. Because it may seem like nothing to you, but it's life and death to us. Just picking up the phone and calling the doctor is scary. I would never have done it if a friend hadn't called the doctor for me and drugged me there. So if anybody really needs to care about this, yes, people out there with mental disorders need to know there's people out there like them who can empathize with them, and they need to have solidarity. But the people who really need this message are our allies, our completely sane allies who can help us get through this.
Michaelin, anything else?
I just go back and talk about how when we as skeptics are trying to speak to somebody who has a mental illness, they can't rationalize out of it. And I know JT said a lot of that earlier, but just try to keep in mind that you've got to try to see it from their perspective. They're not being irrational on purpose. It's just that they're sick. They're sick and they need help.
You're not really telling them anything they don't already know. They know they have beautiful things in their lives and beautiful people in their lives. They know it already. Logically, they already get it, which probably makes it even more frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. No, exactly. And it adds to the guilt, They know that they've got all these great things in their lives, so then they start thinking, well, why do I feel so bad? So many people have it so much worse than me. Why do I feel so down all the time? And the best thing you can do is, if you know somebody's feeling that way, encourage them to seek a doctor, encourage them to seek help.
Can I ask Michaelin a question as we close?
Yeah, please do.
Michaelin, I know the main reason I wanted to see you on this show is because a lot of people out there might be wondering how to deal with living with someone who has a mental condition and the stress of not being able to help them. Can you talk about that? How do you get past the guilt of not being able to help me on some of my bad days sometimes? What do you say to those people?
Yeah, I can briefly touch on that. So I guess, yeah, it's very natural to feel guilty when your spouse or your good friend it has depression and they're feeling down and they can't seem to be happy. So it's easy to blame yourself and think that you're doing something wrong when you can't cheer them up. But it's absolutely nobody's fault in that situation. It's not the person with the illness's fault. It's not your fault for, being a bad friend or a bad spouse or anything like that. And that's something that I do have to deal with. I have to remind myself that JT is sick and I cannot cure that on my own. And I think that as much as I want to give absolutely everything I can to JT and try to cheer him up and try to make him better, it's important to also remember to take care of yourself. So to balance caring for your spouse, caring for your friends, but also bring in that self-care and monitor yourself, because often spouses of people suffering from depression start also showing symptoms of depression. And so keeping that on track and maybe even seeking out therapy on your own, even if you're not depressed, you've got some things you want to talk about and you don't want to make your spouse feel even more guilty, then that's not a bad idea either.
I'm really glad you two have each other. And for the record, you are the cutest couple on my Facebook page. Every time you guys post pictures about each other, I'm just like, oh my goodness, look at how sweet they are. You two make me happy.
Married, that might change.
You make me happy. Jeremiah Bean, let's cap it. What are your final thoughts on the show tonight?
Probably just two quick ones. One is to dispel a myth about suicidality and those people who are trying to help. And that would be that there seems to be some strange cultural myth that if you ask about suicide, or if someone is willing to commit suicide, that you're somehow going to prompt it. Some people think, I don't want to mess with that. That's a dangerous topic. I don't want to bring it up, or he's more likely to do it. But we don't actually see that statistically. That isn't the case. So there's no harm in asking someone. In fact, there can only be good. So, just out front, and I know it's awkward. I have to do this in therapy. It's awkward to ask someone, like, hey, you going to kill yourself, or have you tried, or are you going to try to kill yourself? It's awkward, but it's really important to do, because these are the sorts of people that are going to be the frontline defense. You're the frontline defense against someone taking their own life. And I'd also like to, urge people to press themselves towards, and I noticed Dr. Ray said this, and I was very excited to hear him say this, evidence-based therapy, evidence-based treatment, evidence-based therapy, however you want to talk about it. I'd really encourage you to ask your therapist if they practice that. If they do anything but nod emphatically, then I would encourage you to look maybe elsewhere. The secular community has a really great strength for mental health and treatment, because we already have an affinity for science and for evidence-based theories or anything. So evidence-based treatment seems like a natural option for a skeptic, and I would encourage you to look that out, because if it's not, it's sort of like alternative medicine. If it worked, then it would be called medicine. So it's the same thing with therapies. If it worked, it would be called an evidence-based therapy. And there's a long list of them. And if you can educate yourself. There's a number of authors who talk about this. Chambliss is one of them. But I won't get into that. The point is if you're looking for treatment, I'd hate for you to just waste your time, your money, and your hope on anything that doesn't work.
We mentioned the Secular Therapist Project. I hate to present all these problems without solutions. Outside of the Secular Therapist Project, are there resources for people to get educated or reach out if they're addressing mental health issues, something that you guys are aware of or would recommend?
Yes, there's actually a really helpful one called the National Alliance of Mental Illness, NAMI.org. You can go there, and they've got a support and programs tab. I sometimes point people towards that direction, especially loved ones or people who need help. There's a helpline involved. There's obviously, I think Mike Lynn can talk about this as well, but the National Suicide Hotline, you can Google it, or if you have any questions, I could point you to that direction. But those are two, I think, pretty helpful ones.
They cover it, you guys, or anything else you want to add? Did I lose you? Looks like I lost JT and Michaelin here at the very end of the show with some technical problems, but if they are on the other end of the radio listening, I do want to say thank you both for sharing this part of your lives and for sharing your perspectives. And Jeremiah, thank you for being a part of the broadcast tonight. It's been a real honor to have you, my friend.
Oh, of course. Anytime, of course. It was an honor to be a guest.
All right, wonderful. Take care. I want to leave our audience with something tonight. First of all, my thanks again for sharing these stories that I've seen in my email inbox of people who not just are opening with the windows of their lives to talk about a very sensitive issue, but genuinely want to help other people. They want to foster understanding. They want to get down to the reasons this happens and to help find solutions for it, based in science, based in rationality, based in reality, not in superstition. And for all of you who have been a part of that, even if your letter didn't make it on the show, please know how appreciated it is and how glad I am that you are a part of this audience. And again, I hope that if you are struggling with some kind of a mental health issue in your life, there's something that you are carrying with you and you haven't maybe spoken about it or addressed it. Maybe it's something you felt guilty about or ill-equipped to address, to lean on some of the expertise from the people in this panel and elsewhere, to visit some of the websites and blogs and resources online and elsewhere, the Secular Therapy Project, talk to somebody, engage, be proactive, lean on somebody. Don't try to do it by yourself. After all, this community is evidence that you are not alone. I saw a wonderful blog on Jerry Coyne's website, Why Evolution is True, in the wake of Robin Williams' death, as everybody was talking about depression. And he posted the story that actually dated back to 2006. During a bout of depression, there was a young lady by the name of Crystal Nunn, and she wrote a letter to Stephen Fry. And she said, I had no idea who to turn to, but I really needed someone to turn to and to ease the pain, so I wrote to Stephen Fry because he's my hero and has been through this himself. And lo and behold, he replied to my letter, and I will love him eternally for this. And his letter to her was an ultimate kindness, and I think a wonderful perspective on mental illness. He said this, Dear Crystal, I'm so sorry to hear that life is getting you down at the moment. Goodness knows it can be so tough when nothing seems to fit and little seems to be fulfilling. I'm not sure there's any specific advice I can give that will help bring life back its savor. Although they mean well, it's sometimes quite galling to be reminded how much people love you when you don't love yourself that much. I found it's of some help to think of one's moods and feelings about the world as being similar to weather. Here are some obvious things about the weather. It's real. You can't change it by wishing it away. If it's dark and rainy, it really is dark and rainy, and you can't alter it. It might be dark and rainy for 2 weeks in a row, but it will be sunny one day. It isn't under one's control as to when the sun comes out, but come out it will, one day. It really is the same with one's moods, I think. The wrong approach is to believe that they are illusions. They are real. Depression, anxiety, listlessness, these are as real as the weather, and equally not under one's control, not one's fault, but they will pass. They really will. In the same way that one has to accept the weather, so one has to accept how one feels about life sometimes. Today's a crap day is a perfectly realistic approach. It's all about finding a kind of mental umbrella. Hey-ho, it's raining outside. It isn't my fault, and there's nothing I can do about it but sit it out. But the sun may well come out tomorrow, and when it does, I shall take full advantage. I don't know if any of that is of any use. It may not seem it. And if so, I'm sorry. I just thought I'd drop you a line to wish you well in your search to find a little more pleasure and purpose in life. Very best wishes. Signed, Stephen Fry. And there's nothing I could add to what Stephen said. Beautiful words. Thank you so much to my panel and for all of our listeners being a part of the show tonight. Next week, I speak with my special guest, C.J. Werleman, who has a new book out. It's called Atheists Can't Be Republicans. And it is a controversial book, and he'll be here to defend it and take your calls. If you have an email you'd like to submit for the show, the email address is podcast@thethinkingatheist.com. And I'll see you then. Take care.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.